Here, I am going to start with just a comment on a short section, just because it's kind of interesting in a meh kind of way. This chapter is called Glimage Castle, and this very first section is called Black Rats and Gray Rats, and it's talking about how that there's this castle of Glimage which has super thick walls, so thick and substantial. Wasn't over 4 stories high, but it's so big that like the ordinary farmhouse that stands near it looks like a children's playhouse in comparison. And it is so thick that there's hardly any room inside to actually move. There's only like little slit windows on the upper stories. Can't be on the lower ones, probably because it would weaken the walls too much and everything else would just come tumbling down on it. And the only creatures that live in it at this point, or no human beings were living in it at this point, in the in this in contemporary thing, except for animals. And they go list the animals, and at the very end they talk about the black rats who are in the basement. And unlike other rats, these rats were actually respected because of their unrelenting resistance to their enemy. And the enemy wasn't, as it usually is, humankind. That's usually who exterminates all the animals. In this case, it's gray rats. And what it turns out is the black rats are the native rats. They're the rats that are have lived in the land time immemorial, and the gray rats are immigrant rats, um, who came as a couple of poor immigrants who landed in Malmo from a Libyan sloop about 100 years ago. And they were homeless, starved out wretches who stuck close to the harbor, swam among the piles under the bridges, and ate refuse that was thrown in the water. And they never ventured into the city, which is owned by the black rats. But over time, they gain more power, get larger and larger in number, and eventually they take over the entire country and have driven and killed and starved out all the black rats till now. This is the last holdout, is in Glimage Castle, where these black rats have valiantly resisted all efforts at conquering. And the gray rats are just like, we're going to get them someday. And they say it's a point of honor, but also apparently human beings use the castle as a grain storage. So, as with animal stories, a lot of times it's not maybe talking about animals, and you do wonder if dirty, starved immigrants from Libya taking over a country and driving out the natives, starving them and exterminating them, might not be some really bald on the face of it anti-immigrant story in the middle of a kids book. It kind of sounds like that, though. She does make the point of saying, well, the black rats, when they were in control, they also did horrible stuff. It basically says, it has to be acknowledged, as long as the black rats were in power, they were as much shunned by all other living creatures as the gray rats in our day are. And for just cause. They had thrown themselves upon the poor, fettered prisoners, and tortured them. They had ravished the dead. They had stolen the last turnip from the cellars of the poor, bitten off the feet of the sleeping geese, robbed eggs and chicks from the hens, and committed 1,000 depredations. But, and this is the author, but since they'd become to grief, this seems to have all been forgotten, and no one could help but marvel at the last race that had held out so long against its enemies. So they were also really shitty, but boy, you got to give them respect for resisting the next shitty people who've come in to take over their place. So there's a little bit of distance there. I don't know if you can just say, oh, they were just awesome and these evil gray rats have come in. It's like, no, they were also shitty. So it's slightly a little bit more detached point of view. So they're all shitty. So maybe this isn't rah kind of anti-immigrant propaganda, is what I'm saying, which is good to see in that. But yeah, I wanted to kind of talk that out, because it was like, yeah, this feels kind of gross, and it's fairly cynical. Let's just put it that way. Of of there's this immigrants coming in and overturning these people, but the people that they're overturning were also really shitty. Oh boy. And isn't that funny how when somebody goes from being the shitty despised ruler to being the shitty underdog is like, oh, you can kind of root for the underdog. Isn't that funny that people are like that? All right. I will leave it there and we'll move on to the stork, who is one of the other inhabitants of Glimmage Castle tomorrow.